I'm Frank Vaughn. It's April 29th, 2025. It's the morning after the election. And I think today we're just going to go through some scenarios as to how this government is going to shape up. And then I'm going to talk about several of the bad takes that I see being bandied around before the election count was even done. So let's begin. Now, last night we did a live stream, which was hugely successful by my metrics. Might be worth watching. It's a long one, but I think there's a lot in there. As the count continues, the Liberal seat count keeps creeping up. I said last night when I signed off that we had to see where all these numbers settled. Well, here we are, and the Liberals are settling higher, the Conservatives are settling lower, and the New Democrats are mired at 7 seats. So I made a tweet before I went to bed last night and lied there, wide awake, thinking about all this. And in that tweet I said that it's a Liberal NDP coalition again. Now that's one path. That's the path that we all expect. Jagmeet Singh is gone. He gets to sail off into the sunset with his pension intact, having left the NDP completely destitute, without any credibility, completing the collapse from Jack Layton's highs. It is sad. It actually really is sad to me. I might not politically agree with these people, but there's a whole lot of people who worked really hard over decades to get the NDP where it got to under Jack Layton, only for that man to sink it for his pension. So there's a scenario here where the NDP rediscovers its balls, and they decide they're not going to just rubber stamp the Liberal agenda into being anymore. That's a potential scenario. It could happen. I'm expecting them to just continue governing with the Liberals. They don't have official party status. What else they got left? But a shrewd leader would recognize that the principal reason for the NDP's collapse is not Donald Trump, even though that's a part of it. Trump had a big factor in this election. We'll get into that in a bit. The main reason that they collapsed is because of poor leadership and because, in spite of outraged Singh signaling online how the Liberals were terrible all the time, all he did was rubber stamp their agenda into being. So a shrewd leader, whether it's the interim leader or the next leader of the NDP, may realize that they could probably easily double their support in the next election if they just actually oppose both the Liberals and the Conservatives. So they might be incentivized not to partner with the Liberals. So then what are the Liberals going to do? And that's assuming that as they keep counting votes, the Liberal seat count doesn't just keep creeping up to 172, and then they don't have to worry about any of this. Now, the Greens have managed to elect Elizabeth May again, so we've got our resident wino back in the House. Their co-leader didn't make it. I think they tried to pass the baton. It didn't work out. May is back, and they probably can't get rid of her. The Greens are in bad shape too, but they're irrelevant at the moment until that Liberal seat count gets up to 171, and that one seat might actually be the difference. How crazy is Canada right now? How crazy is this government outcome? So the most likely scenario, if the NDP doesn't cooperate with the Liberals and they decide to rediscover their balls, is the Liberals reach across the aisle to the Bloc. Now that's going to be pricey. The Bloc does not want interprovincial trade barriers to come down. The Bloc does not want to build pipelines, even though they will be united with Carney on that. The two parties, the Liberal Party and the Bloc, have no plan to actually solve the problems that Canada is facing. They have no plan to build the resilience that they talk about. Mark Carney's net zero, solar panel-driven, wind turbine-driven pipe dream is not going to help anybody. As he says in his book, and maybe I need to revisit the book now because there's still a whole bunch in that book that I haven't covered. Maybe I need to complete the series because now, at least for a while, he's going to be prime minister. The Bloc and the Liberals are aligned with screwing the West. That's not going to change. But in terms of strengthening the Federation and some of the more radical ideas that Carney would like to do, the Bloc would present challenges. And the Bloc is going to extract a huge price for any cooperation with this government, and it will be limited. They will only hold Carney in office as long as it serves to their advantage, and then they'll bring down the government. So there's a very real chance that we have an election in short order. Now, all of this can be rendered irrelevant if the NDP decides to keep following in Singh's footsteps and realize that even with these 7 seats, they can go on making their paychecks and securing pensions and doing all the things that the NDP has been doing for the last 4 years. That's the big choice. That's the thing we got to see next. Does the NDP cooperate with the Liberals, or do they rediscover their own identity? Because when they had an identity, they did much better. When they opposed, they did much better. I think we can't underestimate the resentment within the NDP for how Jagmeet Singh led them, in spite of everything, in spite of the, 70 or 80% approved of his leadership. We'll see what they do. And now the other thing that we have to examine is the Conservative Party's performance and Pierre Poilievre's leadership. There's many who say he did a terrible job as leader, and the loss of his seat and the failure to win points to terrible judgment on his part. I think sometimes you're dealt hands when you're playing games that you can't win. And I don't think, you see, a lot of people want to ascribe to one single thing the results of the election. So they want to ascribe it to Trump, they want to ascribe it to Pierre's leadership, but you have to take in all of the relevant pieces. The Trump factor was real, especially in the cities and in particular in Ottawa, because whether it's legitimate or not, or whether he's talking tall and blowing air, or he's serious, the 51st state idea and rhetoric really scares Ottawa, because Ottawa is the country. The bureaucracy is there. The unions are there. Everything emanates from Ottawa. This is an existential threat. And I think that can explain alone why he lost Carleton. And I want to show you this. 2015, the Conservatives got 31.9%. 2019, they got 34.4%. In 2021, they got 33.7%. In this election, they're running at 41.4%. That's a huge gain. Poilievre's leadership, of the last several leaders, is literally the best. And what I didn't find surprising, but I still found shocking, was when I went on X last night before I went to bed, the sheer amount of victory laps that PPC people were doing. They're just like, if you had to just listen to us, if you had to voted your values, we'd have a supermajority now. But no, you backed up the CPC. You losers don't understand math. Here you are, 0.7%. That's what you earned. 70 to 80 times, just off the top of my head, less vote share than the Conservative Party of Canada. You're irrelevant. Your leader sucks. Your philosophy sucks. If it didn't, you wouldn't be in the tank. You wouldn't have lost 80% of your vote share over 2021. You guys don't have the answers. And it's proven by the fact that the Conservative Party gathered 41.4%. They grew their share by 6 or 7 points. The main reason why the Liberals are in power now and about to form another government is because of the NDP's collapse, because of Jagmeet Singh's treacherous, self-serving leadership, sinking that party. That's the main reason. Pierre left it all on the table. You may not agree with things that he says. I know I don't. I didn't like his stance on Ukraine. I didn't like the failure to apply the middle road diplomacy. If we're going to do the nice public face where he talks in reasonable tones and he doesn't talk over people and he does all that, why is it they didn't adopt that when it comes to Trump? I don't know. There was a whole different message that could have been sold there. But essentially, I'm not sure that affected the election outcome. I don't think his Team Canada approach or a different approach to the United States would have changed the results that we see here. Because I don't think Trump was the main factor. I think the NDP collapse was the main factor. I think Trump was a factor in certain places in this country. The fear of the orange man is very real, especially in Eastern Canada. I talked about this at length last night. As a token example of the idiocy that you're dealing with online, here is El Presidente Gus. Most of them are anons. To all the CPC voters that complained about PPC splitting the vote, you got played. You turned against your better judgment and voted out of fear versus voting for your principles and values. If you had voted for the PPC, we may have had a seat, which would have given a voice to conservative values like ours. Where would you have gotten that seat? Your best performance was Bernier in the Beauce at 5%. You suck. You guys need to figure it out. You're irrelevant. Your approach to politics does not work. Calling everybody retarded that doesn't agree with you isn't going to build a base. Do you understand that the CPC vote share grew more than what you lost in the last election? That means they picked up your votes and they picked up votes from the swing vote. They improved their performance. We'll get into that next. You got what you deserve. Fear begets fear, as if the PPC is not a fear-based party as well. Everything about them is fear-based. Everything about them is assault-based. It's like they're like cornered rabbits swinging wildly for the fences, and they 0.7%, boys. That's what you got. 0.7%. Max gets to skate off to Florida with his money. I bet you any money he goes on vacation now, because that's what he's done after every single election cycle. He just disappears again. You fools. There's barely any of you keeping him alive anymore. The guy campaigned in the United States. If campaigning in America, if being down there doing what he did worked, the CPC wouldn't have picked up almost 7 points over last election cycle. And you guys wouldn't have lost 80%. You don't know what you're doing. And yet you're online doing victory laps as though last night didn't even happen. Then, of course, Bernier comes out and he gives a speech where he's chipper and says he's not disappearing. Maybe he retires, maybe he doesn't, but he's got all the money. He's got you people in the bag. You don't even understand how you guys are the suckers in this game. And we will never back down, but sadly you did. Canada deserves better. 0.7%, you fools. When are you going to learn? When are you going to learn something? Back to what's important. Poilievre led the Conservatives to their best performance. In typical times, it would have been a majority government, but these aren't typical times because Jagmeet Singh deliberately tanked the NDP. Will they rediscover themselves? Now, here's the big problem. He lost his seat in Carleton. So you have the best leader of the last 4 cycles delivering the best results, but he doesn't have his seat. It's difficult for me to imagine how the CPC hangs on to him as leader, but in all honesty, they should. They should find a way. They have to find him a by-election somewhere and get him back in the House because there's nowhere left to go. Who else in the Conservative Party can do it? I think they pick anybody else. Like, there's people who think they need to go further right. They go further right, they lose. It's as simple as that. He took them about as far right as you can go in this country. In political reality, if campaigning to the right worked the way that people think it should work, the PPC wouldn't have got 0.7%. Pierre ran a campaign that was about as reasonable as you can expect politically. It delivered results. It just wasn't enough because it's not a typical year. I'm going to read you some other takes and respond to them. Zachary Tisdale says, Dear Conservatives, looks like being liberal-light did not work. Looks like bashing the PPC did nothing to stop the collapse of the NDP vote. So the NDP vote again collapsed because of Singh's leadership. There's also a component of Orange Man bad, but it's not a straight decline across the country. It's a concentrated decline in the urban centers where it counts the most, which is why, again, Poilievre lost his riding. Looks like Canada has been ideologically captured by Marxism. That's a fact. And so are you finally ready to board the 51st state hype train? With the election results that are coming in, do you really think that Donald Trump wants to inherit millions of Canadians that created this outcome? I'm not sure that's realistic. I also think this liberal light did not work. There was a distinct difference in the CPC versus the Liberal Party. I just don't understand how people can do a straight point-by-point comparison and say they are exactly the same. On domestic policy, they were very different. On international, foreign affairs, they were very similar. But on a case-by-case basis, they were objectively better. And it shows in the election results. Even though they didn't win, they picked up close to 7 points. It's one of the highest totals that's ever been achieved. It might be the highest total, actually, for the Conservative Party of Canada. So, like, it's just because they lost doesn't mean that that the approach did not achieve results. It's just a different election year. The NDP collapse drove these results for the various reasons. Aviva Frey says, I took a lot of shit for the criticism I gave to Pierre Poilievre. There was no vote splitting with the PPC. Pierre did exactly what he said he shouldn't do in his interview with Peterson. He compromised his values to move to the center, taking the vote of his base. The vote of his base expanded. He didn't lose his base. He expanded the base. It's not that part that defeated him. It's the other parts that I've highlighted in this video. And again, Marty up north highlights Liberals won by 176 votes. I think he means votes there in Brampton Centre, and the PPC candidate got 274. So there's 4 ridings where the PPC vote, if it went to the Conservative Party of Canada, would have achieved a different outcome for the Conservatives. Maybe not enough, maybe enough. But the fact is, at this point, with the PPC at 0.7%, literal non-factor, they have been, Bernier's been defeated more times than I can count off the top of my head. They're not holding him accountable. They don't have a constitution. They're pretty much irrelevant. The point is, those votes aren't going to anybody else. The real thing, the real concern, is the millions upon millions of Canadians who just stayed home and didn't find their way to a polling station. I mean, that's the real, you might call that an untapped resource, but I call it pure apathy. These people don't feel like they need to be engaged in the political system at all. They're not just low information, they're no information, which is why they don't vote. The PPC with their 100,000 votes and their 0.7%, those votes ain't coming to anybody. They're a bunch of radicals calling people names online. So there's no reason to think that those votes would go to the CPC. The vote splitting argument, I think, is irrelevant. Bernier, I'm so proud of all our candidates and their teams. Yeah, it's easy to be proud when they're working for you for free and sending all the money. Bernier skates off into the sunset yet again with no accountability. Where's the call for a leadership review? Wouldn't matter if there even was one because there's no mechanism in the PPC to elect a new leader. I can't believe the argument. PPC was trending this morning. Krister says, I'm just scrolling randomly, so I don't even know what's going to come up. PPC, no seats. We told you so. There were at least 4 close ridings where the PPC could have helped turn the outcome. Again, those votes aren't coming to anybody else. At this point, the PPC is at the bottom of the barrel. They are what they are. They're not growing, they're shrinking. And they're a bunch of radicals with no class, online, complaining. They're building nothing. You're not getting those votes. None of those votes are coming to anybody else. Daniel Tyree, Bernier looking chipper and unsurprised by his party's dismal results this evening, proudly proclaims the PPC is here to stay. The PPC is currently at 0.8. It's actually 0.7 of the national vote. Their worst ever result, and Bernier got just 5% in his riding. Where is your pathway to growth? When does a terrible election result in your self-examination as a PPCer? I can't believe you idiots. And I'm just, today I'm using some ad homs, but you're idiots. You're online running around declaring victory when you lost massively, thinking you've got the right path when you can't get the votes. Your approach sucks. Have some self-introspection. Have some self-respect. Jeepers creepers. One PPC seat would have been more beneficial to Canada than an entire slate of CPC MPs. Instead, people succumbed to the fear of the greater evil and got the greater evil. I agree with the PPC platform, but if that was a factor, by the way, I'm blocked by this person because they just don't like reality. That's the thing about the PPC. They hate reality. The reality is your approach, your policies, all of your ideas amount to nothing because you can't get the votes and you can't seem to hold your leadership accountable for the situation that they have created. Meanwhile, the Conservatives grew their vote share by 7 points, and now they're going to have a self-examination. They might have to fire the leader who got them that 7 points. That's how capable the CPC is of self-examination, that they might actually turf the best leader and the best outcome that they've managed to achieve in multiple election cycles. because of accountability, something the PPC doesn't have any of. And here's another one, Pigpen Ben. This is why I voted for the PPC, because the PPC doesn't have brown people. Have you looked at their slate of candidates? There's all kinds of brown people, you moron. They have them too. That's part of the landscape of Canada. They ran, I think it's like 2 or 3 dozen minorities. So what are you even talking about? So out there today, there's going to be a bunch of noise and back and forth and a bunch of nonsense. I don't think you should participate in it. I think you should get busy self-improving, learning, getting ready for the next chapter, and waiting. So the most important part of this video is probably, at least to my audience, what's my position vis-a-vis Western Canada? Well, I'm looking to see what Scott Moe does. I'm looking to see what Daniel Smith does. I think for a while here, they're going to sit on the fence and wait to see how this government shakes out. Will the Liberals govern with the NDP? Will they govern with the Bloc? Will the government fall in the next 3 to 4 months, or will we drag this out a year or two? Will Mark Carney be able to aggressively implement the agenda that he set out in his book? If you guys haven't watched the book review series, I know it's long, but now might be a good time to start watching it so that you fully start to understand and comprehend, or just buy his book so that you can fully understand exactly what it is he brings to the table and what's about to happen to Canada. Now, Western Canada, the resources under our feet are ours. Provincial property. We've spent years defending this and enshrining it in the law. The federal government has no business telling us what we can do with our resources. So the premiers need to tell Ottawa to shove it. The other aspect, when it came to the carbon tax, Scott Moe illegally, unlawfully decided to arbitrarily stop collecting it. And he got away with it. And supposedly now the carbon tax is going to disappear. We're going to need more of that. Open defiance of Ottawa. As a bare minimum, enhancing provincial autonomy, more local policing power, more local tax collection power, more power of development, in spite of what the feds want and say. And further to that, I think that's the starting platform. That's where Smith and Moe have to go, no matter what happens. But when it comes to sovereignty, that's the next discussion we've got to have. People keep saying, how are you going to do it? There's treaties to renegotiate. There's problems plethora for you to wade through. When the historical moment arrives, when everybody's losing their livelihood, when you can't afford to eat, when the crisis ramps up, if Carney, because we don't know what he's going to do, other than his book, I think his book is pretty firm, but he's talking about this trade war, this whole elbows up nonsense. Actually, hang on. This is what leads the country now. Look at them dancing, elbows up, like this is moronic. Now, is he going to actually do what he says he's going to do, which is implement a trade war with the United States? If that's the case, the suffering itself will speak far more loudly than anything that's legislated or any treaty. When the historical moment arrives, things change regardless of the papers that you wave around. There are people who wave papers around claiming that this country's not real, and they have some validity in that. Blanchett comes out and says that this is a fake country. There's some validity to that. It's going to be very difficult for Mark Carney, the savior of Canada, who's been parachuted in here to save us from the evil of Donald Trump, to reach across the aisle and govern with the Bloc Québécois that says that Canada is a fake country. But does any of this matter? To a lot of Canadians, it does. And this is the ray of sunshine, folks. The Conservatives drew in a lot of vote support. It's not a weak performance by them. It's just not a typical election. All these bad takes about how terrible they are and how terribly led, if they were so bloody bad, they wouldn't have grown their base. It just wasn't enough because of all the factors I've highlighted. And now look what leads us. It's incredible. Anyway, for the moment, I'm going to wait and see what Moe says. I'm going to wait and see what Smith says. We're going to wait and see how this all shakes out. And as we go forward into the days ahead, we're going to examine options, and we're going to build it out. I think everybody should just relax, okay? Don't panic. We knew that this was like a likely outcome, and it's not as clear as I would like. A Liberal majority would have made it very clear. The fact is the water is muddy, and muddy water means more time. more time to adjust the ship, more time to plan, more time to react, more time to lobby our provincial politicians to stand up for provincial autonomy and to take possession of the resources under the ground which belong to the provinces and not the feds, and develop them and sell them and position ourselves for success in spite of whatever Ottawa wants. And so I'm not going anywhere. If you like the work, please consider financially supporting it via the website so I can keep it going. And I will see you in the next one.